Good evening, folks. Welcome to another session from the Wise Asylum. Well, the Satanic New Year's Eve it is for them Johnny-come-latelys that like to do nasty things to babies and other people. Yeah, the first being their New Year's Day, of course. Ooh. So there you go. What are they up to? I wonder for this season of they would say festivities. Interesting. Not, of course, that we were taking part, but we do have an interesting prophecy that's very well put together academically, etc. And it is all to do with the heavens. So we'll have a look at that a little bit later on. Well, it's all going on, isn't it? So the Q-tards are giving it the big Putin's, attempt on his life and had to flee. There's all sorts of nonsense going on, but what really gets me is that they're really pushing for this nuclear attack on the old UK. I mean, if it weren't for the fact that we had Jalco Westminster full of idiots and Boris the blonde bombshell Churchill in the background running around kicking off and keeping this warmongering going, it might not be as bad as it actually is. But there they are, they're at it, they're up to no good, and the script is very nuclear. And I don't like it. It's not good. Interesting. Z has also contacted the old Zelensky, the Hollywood actor. Who knows what for? Is it to try and calm things down because Vlad's having a mental breakdown and ready to press their buttons? Or what? Is it a warning, perhaps? I don't know, but Zelensky's definitely had a conversation with old Z. Vlad's having kittens, apparently. Q-tards is still going on with the fact that everybody's going to be arrested that's naughty. And it looks like a lot of talk about Obama back. Obama's back in command, so they reckon. Well, we did talk about that last year, didn't we? Not in a live stream. So we were way ahead of the game, if that is the case. But you do see Michelle seems to be getting out and about, or Michael, as he's known, really, not in the fantasy world. She does seem to, he, she, it thing, just seem to be putting its nose back in the old public arena. What's going on? What's going on next to bedazzle the old Americans? Oh, not good. And it's just a shit show in it here, and of course they're all politically active, they're all getting ready for the old election. You've now got every part of social media acclaiming this king, and no longer queen consort, queen, they've just changed it all by themselves. All by themselves. They made it up and just said, yeah, sod it. Church of England is saying the same. We must go for it. And now they want you all to take an oath to him on the day to give you energy. Do you know why? Because there isn't any. There isn't any outside the Zionized aristocracy. So they will need you to acclaim it. So, and I know a lot of people have not woke up to it yet. They're not going to see it even in time. But that's basically what's happening. If it doesn't come out beforehand, then it's certainly going to come out after. And we might get enough people getting together going, right, we're not having this. This is outrageous. We don't consent. We do not give that position sovereignty as people, not as person, not as citizen, but as people. The people. That's the tie from the 1688 Act of Settlement, putting it back in the people. So there's some interesting stuff. Are they trying to subvert that? Yes, they are. Because what is it? The King of the UK. King of Scotland is King of the UK. UK, what's that? Where's England in that? I've not seen it. The obfuscation is just so obvious. But maybe it's just because we do know quite a bit. We know a lot already, so obviously we can see things that most people are not even close to seeing about what's actually going on with this guy. Or more to the point, those behind his persona and moving to do on Old Blighty. It's not good, and it's not good even if you're a jock. You really need to get a grip of that It's not good if you're Welsh. It's not good if you're from Northern Ireland. So, interesting stuff. But there's so much going on, it's quite ridiculous. So, anyway, who's afoot? Let's have a look. It says, PY says evening all, evening Paul. Slipknot says, alright Sean, alright everyone. And Mark says, evening. Good evening, Mark. Paul says, evening Sean and everyone, evening to you. Anita says, hi. Hello Anita. Untitled says, hello and Sean. And Wayne says, hi all. And me says, helm. Okay. Hello Sean and everyone. And 2 eyeballs. We like it. So anyway, let's have a look at what's going on. Oh. So, in the old La La Land. So, the big talking Brexit, they're bigging it up again, talking hard as nails on migration, etc, etc. Well, look at that image. That's the most absurd, procrastinated act you've ever seen, because that's not what's coming over here on any boats. It's just these guys. They're not carrying them. We don't know what they're carrying, but they're not certainly carrying little flea bags. So straight away from the get-go, you've got Politico using some serious Getty images propaganda. And it says, it's by Christina Gallardo and Dan Bloom, April 26th. London, the EU has issued private warnings to the UK government against any attempt to bypass decisions by the European Court of Human Rights in order to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda, multiple senior diplomats have said. European Commission member state officials have expressed repeated concerns about the illegal migration bill. Illegal. You mean it doesn't go with the agreement called Europe? Did they forget we voted for Brexit, this European bunch of tosspots? Yet we all said no, which means we don't have an agreement anymore. The agreement is done and dusted, so... but of course the European Court of Human Rights is still in play here. Which is why I keep saying Brexit with no intention. And what did Truss do? Banged us right back in one step, further than we've ever been, by signing up to PESCO and putting our military directly under the European Commission of Fruitcakes. European Commission member state officials have expressed repeated concerns about the illegal migration bill, a key plank of Rishi Sunak's pledge to stop small boat crossings of the English Channel, which is back in the Commons for further scrutiny Wednesday. Well, I think if you wanted to actually stop it, you'd stop housing them in hotels, giving them money, giving them cards, giving them papers, and allowing them free rein to just disappear, not to be seen again. Then you've got those that were brought over after being trained in either Turkey or indeed Ukraine. Official Secrets Act signed, in they come for the UN. The barbers, have you noticed? It's where they're going, it's where they're filtering them. All these Turkish barbers, they're popping up everywhere. So I've had my feet on the ground on there for quite a while. That's what's happening. And that's where they're being filtered. So this is going on right now, but of course the Rwanda. How ridiculous? Why don't you just stop them coming over here? End of story. That's what we paid a Navy for, I'm quite sure. I don't know what the Navy's doing these days, but there's probably only a rowing boat left in Plymouth and even in the Portsmouth and wherever else them fruitcakes keep their kayaks, if you know what I'm saying. Which is back in the Commons for further scrutiny Wednesday. The proposed law would mean anyone who arrived in the UK illegally would be deported, even if they have made an asylum claim. Oh, interestingly, illegally. So, of course, the UN boys are going to be able to come in and stay. Because they're not here illegally. They're under some agreement with the UN. After weeks of talks with restless backbench MPs on both sides of the Tory party, UK ministers struck twin deals late last week with right-wing Conservatives to make the law even tougher and with moderate Tories to establish more safe and legal routes to Britain. As a result, the UK government appears on collision course with EU politicians who have already voiced their opposition to any attempt to undermine rulings by the ECHR. The political leaders of several EU member states and senior EU officials, including European Commissioner for Home Affairs Alva Johansson and European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic, are among those who have expressed deep concern about the government's attitude toward the ECHR. They are also interested and alarmed by the pressure from the Tory right to abandon the court altogether, according to officials familiar with those involved. Well, of course you have to abandon it. That's the whole point of Brexit, isn't it? You know, the only thing keeping these UN gates open for their operatives is the ECHR and its human right nonsense. Yeah. The refusal are to be exacerbated by the latest developments in the UK government's attempt to get its controversial legislation through Parliament. Around 70 pages of amendments have been put forward for Wednesday's Commons debate, but because there will be time for only a very small number of votes, amendments that have already been adopted by Home Secretary Suella Braverman have the best chance of passing. These include the Kiel deal agreed with the Tory right, which would seek UK ignore by default any interim measure from the ECHR that would stop migrants' removal, known as Rule 39. Orders these court-issued injunctions would be obeyed only on individual cases and if a minister personally chose to honour them. The second key deal with Conservative hardliners will mean UK courts cannot stop a migrant's removal unless that person faces the real, imminent and foreseeable risk of serious and irreversible harm. Other amendments in Braverman's name gave officials the power to seize migrants' mobile phones, restrict the rights of those who say they are children in order to appeal against a Home Office age assessment, and treat migrants who refuse an age assessment as if they were over 18. Warning from the continent. So we're being warned by the European Commission that we have to let these guys in. Where's there any children there, Pat? No. Where's the wives? Families? No, not there. Not there. Despite having to grapple with an increasing number of irregular migrants themselves, European politicians are largely unenthusiastic about Sunak's proposals. Minister London reiterated on several occasions before and after the illegal migration bill began its parliamentary process. Several diplomats told Politico. "We are really worried about it," a senior diplomat from the EU country said, while conservative right-wingers have for now put the calls to leave the European Convention on Human Rights on the back burner. The diplomat said, "For us, there is no partial application of the European Convention on Human Rights. We really hope that Rishi Sunak understands the political significance of the issue. This message has been communicated clear, and the UK government took note," the envoy added. The diplomat praised last week's forceful intervention by British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, who said he was not convinced that leaving the ECHR was necessary to have a robust immigration system. Well, then, obviously, clearly, the diplomat, British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, is a dumbass and fits well down at childcare Westminster. You remember, the government's contracted onto this, and it's dealing in equity. So the EU want us to remain equity under their control. Whereas, I mean, at least here in Blighty, or on Blighty, we need to realise that the problem that we all have is the fact that the government, under patent, is managing the equity side of the birth certificate title. Yeah. So these contracts are only binding upon all the estates, or let's say the equity title and legal title relating to your birth certificate. Nothing to do with common law. It's entirely agreements done on equity, on commerce, with the UN through the European Union. Remember, the Human Rights Commission European Commission did not voted in. The WEF fruitcakes. That's who they are. So that's that load of nonsense. What else have we got? Okay. Roman Empire. Historical events on May the 1st. Now, there used to be much better lists of this, and I used to have quite a lot of different lists for different dates and years on my old websites. They were quite interesting, but I just picked this up, about 5 minutes before we come on, and thought this might be an interesting look, just to remind people that May the 1st is very important, but to the side you class as opposing all good things. So like, the May Day parade in the Soviet Union. It's all the satanic sort of celebrations, celebrating satanic moves, satanic imperialism, and all that goes with it. So I haven't looked at this, so we'll have a quick shove to. So historical events on May the 1st. Now in the Roman Empire, in 305, Diocletian and Maximian retire from the office of Roman Emperor. 1006, supernova observed by Chinese and Egyptians in constellation Lupus. 1048, Bishop Barnell flees St. Peterskerk for Utrecht, Netherlands. 1328, Wars of Scottish Independence end. Treaty of Edinburgh, Northampton. The Kingdom of England recognises the Kingdom of Scotland as an independent state. So that certainly weren't serving anything good. 1394, Akio exercised the Zen temple and its surroundings of an old badger. Events of interest, 1486, Christopher Columbus proposes his plan to search for a western route to India in an audience with Spanish monarch Isabella I. Full support is granted 3 years later in 1489. The 1523 Danish King Christian III arrives in Veer. I'm not sure I understand why that's important. 1551 Council of Trent resumes. Remember, May the 1st we're talking. Appointment of interest, 1625, Prince Frederick Henry appointed Viceroy of Holland. Prince of Orange. 1682, Louis XIV and his court inaugurate Paris Observatory. 1703, Battle of Rultusk, Swedish army beats the Russians. 1704, Boston Newsletter publishes first newspaper advertisement. So the Russians being beat there, 1703, that's way before Russia came into the hands of the Prussians through Catherine the Great. 1704, Boston Newsletter publishes first newspaper advertisement. 1707, Acts of Union. Well, anybody that understands England knows that the Acts of Union is the problem. It was a bankruptcy and pulled two realms in to that administration of bankruptcy. Acts of Union comes into force, uniting England and Scotland to form the United Kingdom of Great Britain. So, if he wants to be the monarch of the United Kingdom, we're talking about this Satanic Act of Union. 1711, Archduke Karol of Austria-Hungarian rebellion signed Peace of Satmar. 1715, Prussia declares war on Sweden. Them bloody Prussians, dodgy buggers. This is the Prussians are basically the Teutonic Knights, who were remnants of the military side of the Knights Templar after they were kicked out from all over the shop. So the Prussians, we say, is still the real Knights Templar, but via the Teutonic Knights. 1718, Spanish Catholic missionaries establish Mission San Antonio de Valero, now known as Alamo, the first of several settlements in what is now San Antonio, Texas. 1725, Spain and Austria signed trade treaty. 1753, publication of Species Planetarum by Carl Linnaeus. The formal start date of plant taxonomy adopted by the International Code of Botanical Nomenclature. 1756, France and Austria sign alliance. So Spain and Austria sign a treaty, and then some decades later France and Austria sign alliance, so there's some groovy stuff going on. 1757, Austria and France divide Prussia. 1759, British fleet occupies Guadeloupe, West Indies, capturing it from France. 1776, Adam Weishaupt found secret society of Illuminati. May the 1st. Remember, all these are May the 1st. 1777, R.B. Sheridan's School for Scandal premieres in London. 1778, American Revolution. The Battle of Crooked Billet begins in Hatboro, Pennsylvania. Music premiere. 1786, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's opera Marriage of Figaro premieres in Vienna with Mozart himself directing. Victory in battle. 1795, Kamehameha, King of Hawaii, defeats Kalinikapula and conquers island of Oahu at Battle of Nuuanu, or such. And they said approximate date. That's a bit naughty to say that you know that it was May the 1st. 1822, John Phillips becomes first mayor of Boston. 1834, Belgian Parliament accepts railway laws. 1840, the penny black, the world's first adhesive postage stamp, is issued by Great Britain. Penny black, everybody were after that back in the day when everybody collected stamps, or at least did at some point of the being a youther. Presidential Convention, 1844, Whig Convention nominates Henry Clay as presidential candidate. Now, Whig Convention, Whigs, of course, are the Scottish Presbyterians, or Puritans, or merchant class. Responsible. This is why they turn masonry upside down with speculative masonry. That's why it pretty much controls the American Freemason lodges. So, all to come in through the Whigs, the opposition to what was the way that England operated. So the Whigs were against England and became exceptionally powerful over there in America, and of course in the East, through the Russells, through all the opium trading and running through India into China, all coming out of this Whig side of things, and people forget that. 1846, Ida Pfeiffer begins trip around the world. 1848, the fraternity of Phi Gamma Delta is founded at Jefferson College in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. 1850, John Geary becomes first mayor of San Francisco, so the mayor games off and up in the old America. So that you can see how they got it ready for the Civil War, can't you? Really, you got Whigs going, many Whigs in. Whigs are having some fun. 1844. 1851, first public flushing toilets, the monkey closets, unveiled by George Jennings as part of the Great Exhibition at Hyde Park, London, costing 1 penny. 1851, Great Exhibition opens in the Crystal Palace, Hyde Park, London. Remember, we did a live stream speaking exactly about what these exhibitions were really all about before the days of television. These were the ways by which they programmed the populations. Historic publication, 1852, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm published the first part of their German dictionary, fully completed in 1961. 1852, the Philippine peso is introduced into circulation. So the Philippines, you can say, has been took over by the banking fraternity, or its royalty has. 1853, Argentina adopts its constitution. 1854, Amsterdam begins transferring drinking water out of the dunes. 1857, William Walker, conqueror of Nicaragua, surrenders to US Navy. 1861, Lee orders Confederate troops under T.G. Jackson to Harper's Ferry. 1862, Major General Benjamin Butler, Union forces occupy New Orleans. 1863, so all these, remember, are May the 1st. 1863, Battle of Chancellorsville, Virginia, 29,000 injured or died. Yeah, we go for the sacrifice. 1863, Battle of Port Gibson, Mississippi. 63, and Confederate national flag replaces stars and bars. 1863, Confederate Congress passes resolution to kill black soldiers. So in 1863, Confederate national flag replaces stars and bars. Interesting. Hospital for the Ruptured and Crippled first opens its doors in New York City, oldest orthopedic hospital in the United States. 1864, Battle, Alexandria, Louisiana, Red River Campaign. 1864, Atlanta Campaign, Georgia begins. 66, American Equal Rights Association forms. 67, Howard University chartered. 67 again, Reconstruction of South begins, black voter registration. 1869, Folies Bergerie opens in Paris. 1873, first US postal card is issued. Here, the first. 1873, Emperor Franz Joseph opens Fifth World Exposition in Vienna. So again, these expositions are going apeshit, aren't they? As a means of programming the general population. 1875, because they introduced race, the idea of race in these times, which wasn't around. It didn't, people didn't look at each other through race at all, and that's what they installed. So this is your Royal Society and all these international organisations. 1875, 238 members of Whiskey Ring accused of anti-US activities. Alexandra Palace, London, reopens after being burnt down in 1873. 1883, Amsterdam's World Fair opens. Again, World Fairs, exhibitions. Really going to town, all May the 1st. 1883, Bob Rogers is acknowledged as the first American pro sports trainer when he's hired by the New York Athletic Club. So 1883, they're now getting into sports and putting their system in. 1883, first National League baseball game in Philadelphia. Since 1876, Providence Grays beat Philadelphia. So both on May the 1st, 1883. Sports. So you can see now these fairs, they're getting into our places. Now they're getting into what we used to set up as just, the working class, like football here, football league, set up by Bury and Aki Stanley, way back in the late 1800s. Yeah, you can see that, can't you? There's a picture there. 1884, Catcher Moses Walker is acknowledged as the first African American to play Major League Baseball, joining the Toledo Blue Stockings. 1884, construction begins on Chicago's first skyscraper, 10 stories. 1884, proclamation of the demand for 8-hour workday in the United States. Anything else of interest? Workers' Day, so you can see socialism now entering America after the Civil War. Strikes are on, work time days, international conference, the Workers' Day, there they go. In they go. Straight after, in the north, comes the communism, the socialism. That's interesting. 1891, legendary pitcher Cy Young wins first game played at Cleveland's League Park. Cleveland Spiders, with no idea who you are, my old China. 1896, 7 days after Parliament was dissolved, Charles Tupper is sworn in as the 6th Prime Minister of Canada. Don't know much about him. 1898, US Admiral George Dewey commands you may fire when you are ready. Gridley as US routs Spanish fleet at Manila. Oh, get them Spaniards out, he says. Admiral George Dewey. 1900, premature blast collapses mine tunnel killing 200 at Schofield, Utah. 1901, Chicago White Sox outfielder, blah blah. We don't need to know about interest. Pan American Exposition. Expositions again, see, look, they've got these well embedded. Events of interest. 1903, King Edward VII of Great Britain visits Paris, where he's defeated in a first step towards improving Anglo-French relations, culminating in the signing of the Entente Cordiale on the 8th of April 1904. Well, that's the man responsible, according to many European leaders of the day, for he was the architect of the First World War. And remember, we went through the Kandori and the Dangoul families, who were his best friends. As Churchill said, he called them as he brought his Jews with him. So they were very well known and powerful, and they were well embedded into this guy, the architect of the First World War, which killed all our men. But of course, as we looked into those, they're clearly not Jewish. So we're not speaking about real Jews, we're talking about those that say they are, but who are not. Because, of course, the merchants first are not interested in any kind of religion. So, 1903, there he is, bringing France and him together, ready for this launch of the slaughter. He's got Kitchener changing the mandate of Freemasonry from the upholding of England to the upholding of Israel, which puts it in sync then with the Scottish Rite, which is the Templars, Teutonic Knights, the Whigs, 1906 Philadelphia Athletics pick, but we don't need. Belgian government of diatribes forms in 1907. Indian Main laws passed. World's most intense shower, 2.4 degrees in 3 minutes at Portobello, Panama. Netherlands begins unity with Belgium. Beverly Hills Hotel opens. Events on it. China's first president, Yuan Shikai, wins dictatorial qualification. So, of course, you've got to remember 3 years on from that, you've got the Bolsheviks getting stuck into Russia. And what we don't see in our historical take on the matter is from the get-go, this socialist, communist madness were being pulled in through the back end into China. And it were getting stuck into China. And I read a book of through the 17 and 1800s from the perspective of a American merchant naval guy who was up the Yangtze River. And you got a lot of history, you got a lot of sense of what was going on, what factions were actually taking over China at those days. And of course the Bolsheviks got in basically on the back that they were arming these rebels, and this is really the reason why Chinese took the communist mantle. So it's been going, all this is just through the 1800s, it's all been moving in one direction. 1915, here we go, the deal done. Britain are not surrendering after the first year because they're all already dead, because the Rothschilds came in and said, we will bring America into the war. And British liner Lusitania leaves New York for Liverpool on May the 1st. Keep that in mind. 1919, L'Ordine Nouveau, Italian socialist weekly newspaper established in Turin by Antonio Gramsci, Angelo Tasca and Palmiro Togliatti. Communists, see, launched it everywhere. 1919, British naval officer David Beatty is promoted to Admiral of the Fleet. So it's 1919, obviously not the kind of man we'd want in our navy, probably not even in our country. Longest, that's it. So there you go, I'll put this up. 1923, May the 1st, Adolf Hitler and Ernest Röhm attempt to break up socialist May Day demonstrators inviting Nazis from as far away as Nuremberg to take part in the violence. See, Adolfo, he's a bad un. German automobile manufacturers Daimler, Motor and Gesellschaft and Benz and Sai begin their first joint venture, later merging to Mercedes-Benz. So there we go. There's lots and lots. Look at that. It just goes on and on and on. And all this is just May the 1st. I used to gather quite a lot of data about particular occult ritual days just from going through such things as that. It's very interesting when you get into stuff like that. Now, you know, we've got 15-minute cities to call them here. They call them 20-minute cities in Europe. So they've got different names for them in different countries, so that hopefully the numbasses won't figure out that they're all talking about the same thing. Now, in Australia, which is renowned for being way ahead of the game in implementing this kind of stuff, they're calling it the Strong Cities Network. And it's a declaration made by Melbourne in July in 18, which is before the book script. We, the mayors, governors and subnational leaders of the Strong Cities Network, condemn the escalation and impact of terrorism, violent extremism and social polarisation in communities the world over. We underline that 2016 saw more countries than ever before suffer terrorist attacks, with over 25,000 deaths globally as a result of increasingly coordinated and strategic campaigns by militant extreme groups, blah blah blah. Nobody's going to argue with that. We believe that local leaders have a unique role in responding to these challenges. So it's your local leaders' role in dealing with international terrorism. Did you get that? This is how ridiculous this is, but this is a declaration. They mean it. You're agreeing to it. You're in agreement, unless you say otherwise. With more than half the world's population currently living in urban areas projected to rise 2/3 by 2050, we underline that in both. I don't think so. They've just done the big book script. In urbanised rural communities, blah 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 blah, will have increased importance in dynamic and globalised world. So, local governance to begin to sell up for more power. On that basis, we promote global cooperation between subnational leaders. Remember, this is an area of Melbourne, for God's sake. It's like Blackburn, Burnley, you know what I mean? But Dingle's deciding that all of a sudden we're going to deal with global terrorism. We're disgusted about the threat to all our citizens, because you don't want to be a citizen, do you? With more than half of the world's population currently in urban areas, what's got to do with Burnley? Or Blackburn? Nothing. And what's it got to do with them councillors that don't know their arse from their elbow? Because they're talking about stakeholder governance. They're talking about executive of the councils for governance, not them fruitcakes that you elect every time they ask you to, and then take the oath to the crown and no longer work for you, they work for the party. On that basis, we promote global cooperation between subnational leaders on the most challenging issues of our time, and we unite to share knowledge, learning and innovation. Collectively, a strong cities network committed to meeting the need for effective local, municipal and urban governance. Yeah. And able to address our most important shared challenges amid complex and competing demands. So in particular, we declare the need for mayors, governors and subnational leaders too. So here it's your mayors, PCC, controlling the chief constable, completely corporate. They use the same system. Promote and uphold the guiding principles of the strong cities network, including human rights, good governance, standing up to all forms of discrimination, hate and violence, and building strong partnerships between cities and the communities they represent. Share, learn and adapt international best practice on prevention and resilience, countering the isolation that many localities may experience in addressing these issues. Build cross-sectoral partnerships to prevent counter-polarisation. And they want a task force on public-private partnership. That just means they're nicking it. Develop and implement evidence integrated and effective local strategies to tackle the drivers of violent extremism. We should develop and implement evidenced. Yeah. Identify, adopt and strengthen a credible, sustainable local prevention infrastructure which connects cities and municipalities with grassroots communities, key frontline services and local communities. Can you see why they use that frontline going through the book script? Because it's part of the corporate script. They need to get in your mind. So at the mention of that, you see blue light, beep, 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 saviours, you're happy. That's how easy you blank. Drive innovation in data collected. Well, look at that. They're declaring they're going to do this to you. They're going to do it and they're doing it. And they've been doing it. And they want to empower and equip frontline services which drive prevention at local levels. So there you go. It looks innocent. But then if you go to Nexton, you start to see that it's all about climate crisis. Green News Digest at the sea. Yeah? This is where it is. And what we are, what we do, raising that. Wind and rain. Influence the global agenda. Building a movement. Scaling up climate action. Building movements on the land. Our cities. That means theirs. News Insight, Career, blah, blah, blah. So you can see it's just a full-on corporate system. And everything that's going on in the background to scare you to death, get you to move in this direction, is so that you don't put together the pieces and see that clearly the corporate side of everything is taking over on the equitable side, because obviously governments have decided it's best for equity if they hand it over back to the private. So it's gone from monarch to government, which is why they needed socialism, why they needed capitalism, to divide up what is two parts of the same game that's needed to actually run things correctly. So there you go, different names they're giving them. That's how much they don't want you to suss the game. They just really don't want folk to see what's really going on and what they're actually hiding. And that's pretty much where we're at with that. So, anybody else joined us? Sean in chat says, "Cos, alright matey, with alien fingers and alien head." Joanne Dolman, hello Joanne. Cos 1973, we've got finish line car puffing out smoke. What you mean? They're nearly at the finish line. Well, they're not actually going to stop, chaps, because they are operating your equitable side of the estate that you failed to claim. So when you start to look at it like that, is actually what is going on. You can see that it's just one thing following another. You could say really that the reason why we're in this mess is because of the actual original breakup of what was the kingdoms. And every time the barons moved against that to sideline the common law, they created these instruments, the equity side of things, the persons for a mask. And here we are today. That's the equitable side of it. So that's wholly in the hands of the barons, the aristocracy that went against the actual idea that the monarch held your estate in right to the land that you have appointed to you. So the two completely set, and that's your common law. There's your common law, monarch holding estates in trust because you're thick. But then an agreement between the monarch and parliament giving them a patent to create this surname title and manage it, the equitable side of it, and throw the legal liability on you. So that's only one level. Then you've got the common law level, and then of course you've got the ultimate agreement hidden side with the Vatican, which gave the kingdoms their commission in the first place. But of course they took over all the kingdoms through Napoleon, putting on all Victoria's offspring all over Europe in these monarchy seats. Told us lots of lies about the Russian Tsars, because they weren't Romanovs at all. The last Romanov were killed by Catherine the Great when she took over Russia, and that would be Peter III, the last Romanov. So there must be a reason why they had to portray the Russians as being the Romanovs when they'd already got rid of them. So whoever the Romanovs were claiming to be, were obviously a part and parcel of the game, which is probably why they weren't murdered. It's just scripted public consumption, get everybody excited. So I don't know, but there we go. So there, right. So this here is interesting. It's actually very interesting. It says dating of Rohin Sakta Bida, and it's to do. See, I can't read them words, but I'll try. Parag Mahajani, Emmi Vahaya, Mohanapte Ap Jam Kahedkar. I could talk fluent Indian. So we don't need to. So the beginning of this, look, these are the guys that have done it. So obviously, these are clever guys. They've done the research. They're academics. And it says abstract. RSB, which refers to Rohini Sakta Bida, so it's abbreviated RSB, is referred in Indian literature as an event of great significance. RSB is said to occur when either Saturn or Mars pass through the triangle formed by A and stars of the Taurus constellation, or the Vazaba. We have searched the literature and found descriptions of RSB recorded by several authors. We have compiled the various references to this event and show that the event has been given considerable importance in the literature, with only minor changes in the description over the millenniums. So they're basically saying they've tapped into an even older story, with only minor changes in the description over the millenniums. Based on this, we have derived a common minimal interpretation of the same. In some literature, this event is correlated with a huge disaster. So we're looking at end of the world kind of, so we're looking at that again here, but from a different angle. We have searched the astronomical database using the latest ephemeris for RSB. We found a series of RSB events with Mars. The latest event occurred in 5284 BC, but before that it occurred several times during the 10th millennium BC. However, since 5284 BC, the event has not occurred and is not expected to occur till 10,000 AD. So this is some supreme massive event. So of course, we're talking 528 BC, that means 7,284 years. So it's a long time. During 10,000 to 9,000 BC, the end of the last ice age indicates that there was a sudden rise in the sea level by 60 metres over a few hundred years, indicating a yearly rise of 22 metres per year. This rise reached a plateau around 9,000 BC, when the rate of increase came down to about 2 millimetres per year, until about 5,500 BC, when once again it rose significantly by 10 millimetres a year for about 1,000 years, to reach the currently observed levels. Get that? So we're now living in a time when the sea level is at the highest it's ever been. Now, to say that this were happening incrementally would then come in as an opposing idea to the accepted story that the firmament burst and all the waters came in at once. So that's interesting in and of itself, unless we are talking about completely different events, which probably are actually, but this is really showing an incremental sea level rise, which of course the wind and rainers have jumped on like you won't believe, even though it hasn't even changed a millimetre in the entire time since they brought in the ozone layer script through that UFO guy who claimed to be in contact with the Pleiadians, what we called, I can't remember his name. So that was the first introduction of you got getting excited about all up there in the 70s. So the 1970s gave us the ozone layer, that got all the fruitcakes off with the acid rain through the 80s. You know, there were quite a few teachers, weren't they, at the schools. There were always a couple designated to be the complete dicks. I think you were a guy called Jim McCaffrey at Moorhead. And I think there were a female one at it and all. I think she was Miss Goodyear, but she was actually not a bad lass. But clearly she'd been mind controlled by Jim McCaffrey into terrifying everybody about acid rain and nuclear Armageddon. Anyway, so we are now, according to this, at the highest point so far in this event as far as sea level goes. Meaning, there were a hell of a lot more land before. How about that? We must therefore suggest that. So when you start to look at it like that, then the idea that the creator analogy of our known Earth only being one creator in the reflection that the moon is of the bigger entirety of the Earth, I don't know. Anyway, of course I'm not even agreeing with that, I'm just saying, but things like this, you can start to understand now. Such could be possible because one of the scenarios in that idea is that another crater emptied itself into this crater, anyway, and we got trapped by the oceans. But there are other beings on the outside of that crater, kind of thing. We therefore suggest that whoever correlated the RSB with huge disasters must have done so around 5284 BC and could have had some idea about the disasters that coincided with the earlier phases of RSB, which occurred in 9860 BC, 9828 BC, 9371 BC, and 9339 BC. This suggests that the tradition of intricate astronomical observations is older than 7,000 years from present. 1. Taurus constellation. Taurus constellation. So if you're ever looking for Pleiades, it's in the Taurus constellation. So that's what you're looking at, which is just to the right of Orion rising. Taurus constellation is shown in figure 1. There's figure 1. There's Pleiades, and I think Orion's over here. Now let me just check with you that you can actually see this, because sometimes you can't actually see it, can you? So let me come back to you. Can you see this? Yeah, of course you can. It looks alright. Groovy. Taurus constellation shown in figure 1. The stars A and E and Y form a V shape which represents the head of Taurus, the bull. The stars B and looks like an S form the horns of the bull. Alternatively, it has also been imagined as a wain with the two outstretched stars B and S tau indicating where the bulls would be tied to the wain. And we do have these figure 1. The star Aldebaran, or Rohini, is the primary star of the constellation. In the Indian literature and calendrical system, Taurus constellation is called as Vrisabha, or a Tau is referred to as Rohini, and I don't know why it's got that funny thing. Rohini Sakata, or the wane of Rohini, consists of AE and Y Tau. Now, of course, I don't even understand this lingo, so I mean, if you're aware of this stuff, then probably it's going to make a hell of a lot more sense to you than actual lingo. But for those of us who are maybe interested in the fact that the sea levels have been much lower, much lower by the sounds of it, in the past. So that's figure 1. 2. Importance of Rohini Sakata Bedda. The ancient Indian literature is replete with references to RSB. For example, according to Varhamihara's Brihat Samhita, or Samhita, and his references to the work of Garga 2, when Mars, Saturn, or a comet passes through the Rohini Sakata, this event is called the RSB. According to BS, when it happens, a great disaster will occur. We reproduce below some examples of the references to RSB. In each case, we have given the loka along with the translation in brackets and an interpretation. We first reproduce the couplet as given in BS2. Ula iliblula indablamblambla ilabluba. You know I can do that language, did you? Never you do. And then underneath in our language it says, Rohini Hakatam Akanandando. Can you do the fandango? Akanandando. Yadi Binati read her tifo. What a funny language. How can you make sense out of this? Rudi Rostava Sheik Kim Vadimi Yadnistazaga Yagadabdu Sakayam Bria Bleh. That's him. And it says in so that's not our lingo. My apologies. It says in our lingo, when Saturn, Mars, or a comet cuts the wane of Rohini, what shall I say? Alas, for the whole world will perish, being plunged in the ocean of misery. So basically, we got plunged into the ocean of misery in the flood, and it's just got worse, because the sea levels have been rising and rising. And here we are now, all sat on top of the mountain tops, basically, of the real land that's beneath us. Well, that's interesting. Dating of RSB says, Mars, Saturn, or a comet moves through the triangular wane of Rohini, a major disaster will occur. Surya Siddhanta 3 is even more specific about where the constellation should be located for RSB to occur. It refers to the same event in the following words. Like that. See? And he says, verse up to that set back and Visha and become 8:13. So if you get that. And then it says, in our lingo, in Taurus at 17th degree, a planet of which the latitude is a little more than 2 degrees south, will split the wane of Rohini. The starting point of constellation Vrisabha is at 30 longitude. Further 17 degrees longitude into the constellation is the Rohini Nakshatra, according to the Shloka, a planet that is further 17 degrees into the constellation of Vrishabha, and whose south latitude is a little more than 2 degrees, will split the wane of Rohini. Here the latitude and longitude are with respect to ecliptic. Rohini, are we talking Lord of the Rings here? The Rohan, I don't know, I'm just, of course, talking in my ass. Burgess 3 has clarified this, and we summarise his comments here. The asterism Rohini is composed of 5 principal stars in the head of Taurus. The distance of the stars in longitude from the initial point of the sphere vary from 45 degrees 46 for Y tau to 49 degrees 45 for A tau Rohini. Hence the 17th degree into Vasabha, commencing at the initial point of the sphere, which is 180 degrees opposite of A Virginis or Spica. Now we've heard Claudio speaks about Spica. Virginis. Well, that's interesting. So what's going down there? Because, of course, if this is correct, then we're not looking at any major catastrophe in relation to the Sea of Misery. Are we? Opposite of Virginis Spica is very nearly the middle of the wane. The latitude of its stars again varies from 2 degrees 36 for E tau to 5 degrees 45 for 0 tau. Hence, to come into collision with or to enter the wane, a planet must be more than 2 degrees of south latitude. He notes that the Siddhanta does not inform us what would be the consequences of such an occurrence, that belongs rather to the domain of astrology rather than of astronomy. Mahasiddhanta 4 by Aryabhata 2 also expresses similar events as the earlier two verses. Ready? Shulumala in Namurgulumba in Karanga Kuntakinte. Says Yamo Beno Blurimium im 12:13. It says in our lingo, when the latitude is greater than 2 degrees in Vasabha, Resi at 17 degrees, when that happens, it splits the wane. In Graha Leghavam 5, the same event is referred to in the following terms. Hu halawi manga igarugarigalanga angarangaranga. Like that. And that looks like 655. Gavi nakagulumblunari 11:7. When the point reference is situated 70 degrees into Taurus and a planet whose latitude is more than 50 angulas, RSB is said to have occurred. When Mars, Saturn and Moon can perform RSB, great disasters occur. This passage is essentially a rephrasing of BS, except that Comet is replaced with Moon, and a better specification of where Rohini should be, with respect to the starting of Vasabha, is described. The unit of angulas used here is defined as follows. The angular diameter of Moon is said to be 12 angulas, which amounts to 0.5 degrees, hence 50 angulas. Comes slightly more than 2 degrees. It seems that addition of Moon is a translational reassessment, since Moon is more systematic than Comet. However, transit of Moon through Taurus is not infrequent and cannot possibly be associated with massive destructions. This is acknowledged by the author in the following verse. The next verse then says, 5555. And then 11:8. And then in our lingo it says RSB occurs when Rihu is in the 8 nakatras between Gemini and Virgo, both inclusive. The 8 nakatras and Punarvasa, Pusa, Alble, Maga, Perv, Phlegum, Uter, Phlegum, Aster, and Sutra, RSB by Saturn or Mars happens very rarely. Given the present nodes of Saturn and Mars, this is not possible now. When the ascending node of Moon Ryu is anywhere between asterisms Panurvasu and next 7 asterisms, the membrane splits the wane of Rohini. But this is not true for Mars and Saturn because the motion of their nodes is very slow. They split the wane of Rohini after a long period of time. Yugentara. Because there's a lot of funny lingo in here, isn't there? In Table 1, we have given rise to a more extensive list of various ancient books in which reference to RSB can be found along with their periods. See also Colebrook, which is 6. Table 1, reference to RSB in various ancient Indian literatures, arranged according to the approximate dates of their publication. So this is not some pie-in-the-sky garbage, this is real stuff. Name of the book, Surya Siddhanta, and it's modern, and reference 3, approximate period 400 to 800 AD, chapter 8, sloka 13. Birhat Samhit, reference 1 and 2, 505 OD, chapter 47:14. Mahabhaskaraya 7, 600 AD 3. Mahasiddhanta 4, 853, 990 AD. Kanda Kahadak 628 AD. Brahmasputa Siddhanta 628 AD. Sisidl Tantra Lal 628 AD. And Gral Halagav 1545 AD. So earliest period going back to 400 to 8 AD approximately for that book. So you're talking similar kind of decades to the Constantine version of Christianity. You're talking about a lot of things going on around this time, but this RSB event and data is known at 400 to 800 AD. In summary, therefore, the RSB is said to occur when either Saturn or Mars pass through the Rohini Nakshatra. It's very interesting to note that Gaisa Devna has clearly noted that this event can only occur in some other future yuga, since in the present movements of the stars, RSB is impossible. This passage is correlated by some with a major upheaval on Earth. Considering the range of references to RSB, the event must have been of considerable magnitude and importance and left a deep impression on its observers. It is unlikely that references to events associated with intrahuman affairs would have created such a sensation. Of all the literature where references to RSB are found, the work of Garga, as noted in 2, is probably the oldest. The date of Garga is unknown. So it's not even on there. So it goes back even before then. 3. Analysis of the astronomical data. Amongst the objects capable of RSB, we ignore comets in this analysis because there are many long-term comets whose trajectories cannot be determined. We also ignore moon, since the passage of moon through Rohini is a common affair. Hence we have searched for RSB with either Saturn or Mars using the best available commercial software. SkyMap Pro 8.11, which incorporates the most accurate ephemeris of planetary movements, as well as the most accurate available data on stellar movements. It should be noted that the sidereal period of Saturn is 2946 years. Hence, we need to check only once every 30 years for a potential RSB. We discussed the various aspects of our astronomical search below. Based on currently available ephemeris, SkyMap Pro simulates the night sky accurately till Julian Day 1st, i.e. January the 1st, 4713 BC. This software incorporates Tycho and Hipparcos data of stellar location and movement, allowing accurate extrapolation of data into deep past and future. In this search, we found there are no events of RSB from 4713 BC to 10,000 AD. We then extended the search till 10,000 BC using the NASA database of ephemeris. Horizons DL 4 or 813. We found 4 events of RSB in 5284 BC, 9339 BC, and 9371 BC, and 9860 BC, all by Mars. We also found 1 event in 9828 BC where a Tau is occulted. According to the present the used ephemeris, RSB by Saturn has no occurrence since 10,000 BC. That's interesting. So Mars has been cited, hasn't it, as important in the last such a cataclysms, in so much as even some believe that Mars was in the orbit the Earth has now. And Mars has been so events to do with this. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them. That's quite interesting. And 5 to 8 as well, so 6. Right, okay, so interesting. 3.1 possible errors in calculations. The angular error for Saturn over the 3,000 years is about 0.5 arcoseconds. The radial error is about 400 kilometers. At the distance of Saturn from the Earth at opposition, this error is 0.5 arcosecond, or arcseconds rather. That is about 3.500 km for Mars. The angular error is less than 8 arcseconds, which is about 3,000 kilometres at opposition. The radial L can be kept up to 100 kilometres. The ephemeris used here is 10,000 BC to 9,999 AD, shows that the period of Mars' nodal regression is about 145,000 years, and for Saturn about 165,000 years. Over 3,000 years, the errors in the geocentric right ascension and declination, longitude and latitude of Saturn grew to only about 0.5 arcseconds, 400 kilometres, those for Mars no greater than 8 arcseconds, 520 kilometres. For a time of even 10,000 years, though the errors may be at most 10 times as large as those over 3,000 years, the present orbital plane of Saturn is known better 1 arcsecond, then that error does not grow much in time. The backtrack error, however, might grow as much as 10 arcseconds in 3,000 years, possibly 40 to 50 arcseconds in blah 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 blah. We've also checked the Tycho catalogue, finding an uncertainty in the declination proper motion of tau to be 0.8 milliarseconds a year, i.e. 0.8 seconds a millennium, 8 arcoseconds in 10,000 years. Thus, the motion of the star is also accurately known for these purposes. We can say with some degree of certainty that Saturn has not appeared below tau, i.e. there has been no RSP by Saturn since at least before 10,000 BC, and tau moves 0.036 arcseconds a year in declination, so it was actually more northwards than it is now. Even so, there is no instance when Saturn passes through the triangle formed by a tau, y tau, and tau. 3-2 results. The closest that Saturn came to tau is at 53,000 BC and 3,500 BC, and they are no closer than about 0.27 degrees. The points of closest approach for Saturn are given in Table 2. Saturn normally remains above this star, and hence outside RSB, as column 1 shows. This distance has not become negative for the last 10,000 years, which should have implied an RBS. Okay, so they're saying in the sky Saturn has come down, which is why it's not going across that particular. It's interesting. So this is Table 2. I'm not sure I'll get that too much, but obviously if you're into that data, that's going to have meaning for you. I'm only a novice. Mars. In Figure 2 we have given some examples of the transit of Mars close to Rohini around 5000 BC. Period for each figures from left to right and top to bottom are given in Table 2. So 5299, yeah, day of the year. Oh, more. I'm on BC. Yeah, BC. So that's what it is. Obviously, when it does rain, it's a long period of shit, things going on. It looks in it. Okay. Interesting. As can be seen from the figure, for the entire period of 6 millennium BC, RSB occurred only in 5284 BC. The analysis was done for the entire period from 3000 BC to 10,000 BC. So in 5284 BC, basically, is that the beginning of where we are now at this rise to the sea levels that we're actually at? That's interesting. Now, obviously, this doesn't even make sense to me, so I have no idea. But we can go through it so people can take a look. Figure 2, movement of Mars around Rohini Nakshatra for selected periods in 6 millennium BC. The periods are given in Table 3. The graphs are of sky location, right ascension, x-axis, and declination, y-axis. In each figure, the 3 stars are shown with open circle, while the motion of Mars in steps of 1 day is shown. Using the period of plotting is given at the top. Note the 3 stars, blah blah blah. Tower in anti-clockwise direction, starting with bottom right. This is in reverse order compared to Figure 1. There have been only 4 clear instances of RSB by Mars in 5284 BC, 7287 BP, 9339 BC. What does that mean, BP? 9339 BC, 11342 BP. BP? 1137, yeah, and 9860 BC. 11863 BP. The event in 9828 BC. Oh, well, yeah, that's adding the 2000, the BP in it. Alright, got it. I got a bit confusing. This event in 9828 BC, or 11,831 years ago, was an occultation of Tau, and hence is a borderline case for RSP. Amongst these, in 5284 BC and 9371 BC, Mars initially moves east in retrograde motion, and then after a maximum displacement outside the circle it returns into RSP. The 5 instances are given in figures 3a to e. As stated earlier, we found no RSP instances by Saturn. In 13, originally published in 1896, S.B. Dixit Dixit, I love it, has analysed the RSP in great details, and based on his calculations on the methods given in 14, it was proposed that RSP by Saturn must have occurred at 5371 BC. However, we do not find this association using current ephemeris. So is that why they were obsessed with Saturn? I don't know. 5371, however, we can't find it. We can't find that to be the case. Figure 3 is showing events listed, blah blah blah. It's shown along with the case property. We don't really understand them, do we? So, search for correlated geological event associated with RSP. In the literature, RSP is associated with a major disaster. In the exact description of the authors, use the words "the whole world will perish," being plunged into the ocean of misery. In Graha Leg Havam, the disaster described as large-scale death of people, Janakaya. These descriptions imply either a massive earthquake or flooding. We have looked for events of possible large-scale flooding of land by a sudden rise in sea levels. However, it's not possible to get detailed information on sea level or water level changes in different regions of the Earth in great detail. We therefore assume that dramatic rise of sea level at any location of the Earth that have occurred during the global phenomena would be reflected elsewhere. Kelly and Dixon have given the sea level records around Maine, USA from 1600 or 16,000, so that's 15,000 BC till today, and we can see this in a bit, I think in figure 4. The rise in sea levels is due to the melting of ice after the last ice age. 2 instances of dramatic rise in sea levels are recorded. The first one lasted between 11,000 BP, which is 9,000 BC, and 9,500 BP, or 7,500 BC. So that's 1,500 years. When the sea level rose by 22 millimeters a year. After that, for about 2,500 years, from 9,500 BP to 7,500 BC, or to 7,000 BP, that's getting confusing, the levels remained steady. Then around 7,000 or 5,000 BC, PB. 7,000 BP, 5,000 PB, what's that? The sea again rose dramatically by about 10 millimeters a year for 2,000 years. Fucking hell, 10 millimeters years, over for 2,000 years. The first rise corresponds to the years close to the second set of RSP in figure 4. It's a very short one, with the sea levels rising by 33 metres in 1,500 years. Similarly, the second rise is time correlated to the second RSP. So metres above modern sea level, that said. Sea level high stands for sea level low stand. It's quite a rise, isn't it? So that's something been leaking into our pond or something. Figure 4, changes in the sea level from 16,000 BC to present, as noted on the sea coast of Spain. In the figure, we have added 4 markings as lines A, B, and C, and D. Where? Unless it's one to come. As follows. First steep rise, line A, at 11,000 BP, 9,000... I'll do the BC. At 9,000 BC, end of this rise, line B, at 8000 BC, and at the start of second major rise, line C, at 6000. The last major rise, line D, occurred at 7000 BP or 5000 BC. There was a major rise from 7000 BP till about 2000 BP. That's a lot. But since this is not under study here, we ignore the issue here. The rising level between lines A and B is 22 millimeters a year, and that between lines C and D is 2 millimeters a year. These numbers are given by the original authors from line D to about 5000 BP, 3000 BC. The rise is 7.5 millimeters a year, hence the period of RSB, which are around 11,300 BP or 9,300 BC, and falls at the start of the first severe rise of 22 millimeters a year, and the second at the start of the second rise at 7200 BP, 5200 BC, falls in line D, the period of second rapid rise phase. We therefore feel that the original memory of RSB must be incorporated to the tradition most probably in 5284 BC by someone with some memory of the events in the 10th millennium BC. We conclude that the authors who associated the RSB with Pralaya must have formed the text at least around 5200 BC. Discussion. According to our study, RSB last occurred in 5284 BC, but was first reported by Varahamihira in 6th century AD, who quotes Verdagarga. While there have been several references to Verdagarga in ancient literature right from Vedic periods, no authentic work of Verdagarga has been found. Also, authors of later period have pointed out that RSB cannot possibly be a recent event, but must refer to an ancient epoch. It is also clear that, as per our present conservative opinion, the Indo-European people would be in Central Asia around the 6th millennium BC. They were nomadic in habitat and would not have been sensitive to night sky to the extent where they would notice an event like RSB. However, the Harappan people would have been capable of such observations, as well as sensitive to noticing changes in astronomical patterns in view of their seafaring habits. We analyse this in detail below. Harappan. Interesting. The current commonly agreed chronology suggests that the period of Vedas is around 1200 BC to 3200, which is 3200 years ago. And the oldest parts of the Rig Veda date back to 3000 BC or 5000 years ago. It's also now clear that the Vedic people came from Central Asia and gradually assimilated into Harappan civilization, eventually crossing it and going to the Gangatic plains, the oldest sites associated with the Harappan civilization, unearthed till today, date back to earlier than 6000 BC or 8000 years ago. Harappan people are known to have settled life as inferred from the site of Mehergarh. Also, it seems that the Harappan civilization had no tradition of large-scale written manuscripts. Since the civilization itself was highly evolved, it must have had a huge storehouse of knowledge, which must have been passed on by a strong oral tradition. That's a guess. The Indus Valley civilization grew around the Saravasti and Indus rivers and had strong seafaring traditions, hence they must have been sensitive to astronomy as well as sea level changes, which can also produce river level changes upstream, especially for ports and other facilities that are typically built less than 1 to 10 metres above sea level. It is apparent that Indus Valley civilization would have been sensitive to the movement of the seas, and that the Vedic and late Vedic period would certainly have known about the accumulated knowledge of the Harappan civilization. Geological upheaval in the form of the rise of sea level is known through the studies of sea levels. It is probably not a coincidence that the great rise in sea levels occurred in the 10th to 6th millennium BC. It's obvious that the prehistoric man must have made his observations in different parts of the world. Yeah, but I would assume that back then they were as smarter than we are today. It's as though they're coming from the standpoint that what we're experiencing today is so advanced because we're evolving. It's bollocks. In my opinion. It's obvious that the prehistoric man must have made observations in different parts of the world. Memory of such floods is preserved in different cultures. The legend of Noah's Ark in the Judaic tradition and similar Vedic tradition, like reference to Manu and Prayala, might be quoted as an example. The region of the Indus Valley also lies on one of the most seismically active regions and has been hit by several major earthquakes. Excuse me. It forms a region where the Indian tectonic plate meets the Asian plate, and hence this region has been seismically very active from ancient times. However, there are few reliable data in archaeoseismology to confirm whether major earthquakes occurred in 5284 BC or thereafter around the Indus-Saraswati River region. We therefore mention this as a possible catastrophic event that could have been precipitated due to heavy flooding in the absence of any firm data. We do not pursue it further here. But of course, these guys are speaking, this data is specifically speaking about water, in it, deluges and such. Whereas, aren't we to believe that it'll be next destroyed by fire? So, doesn't mean there's nothing. It just means that if you're taking this data relative to Taurus and Mars and Saturn, these sort of water deluges seem to work hand in hand. The initial literature of the Rig Veda Indo-Iranian people clearly makes no mention of the Harappan people. Well, Indo-Iranian, they came into that. They're not originally from that. And their interactions, even though there is strong evidence that such interactions must have occurred before the Vedic literature was formally codified, it therefore seems that the non-Indo-European knowledge was consciously not codified in the Vedic literature, and was continuously passed on by oral traditions only. And evidence of this attitude is that even knowledge of large cities of Harappan civilization that the Vedic people must have known is not mentioned in the ancient Vedic literature. In this vein, it seems that other information such RSB were also not recorded in the Vedic literature, hence events like RSB, which are not of Indo-European in origin but of Harappan origin, would not have been noted until much later, probably in literature now lost, from which Vanhin Mahira made his noting in 6th century AD in Brihat Samhita. While it's possible to argue that RSB was not a genuine observation but was imagined simply as an astrological omen, other evidence is against such an interpretation for the following reasons. V. M. Herrera's work itself does not claim to have observed the event but claims to reproduce the earlier reference to Verdagarga. While there are several references to Verdagarga in ancient literature, no specific document authored by him has been found indicating that his work seems to have been lost. Also, the omen of RSB is said to bring overall destruction, pralaya, and is clearly not something an astrologer would create to scare a king or a common man. It does not say, for example, that if RSB occurs, people born under some specific signs should be careful, or that a particular god will get upset, or that the king should be aware of some type of a person. The kind of forecasts of greater utility to astrologers. The prediction of a general catastrophic disaster is of no value to an astrologer. It is clear that even those who have reproduced the noting on RSB knew that it cannot be observed event or of the present epoch and can only refer to observations of an earlier epoch. This reinforces the point that the RSB could not have been conjectured for astrological reasons, as it had no usable astrological connection. We propose that the confusion of either Mars or Saturn caused in the RSB is primarily due to the oral transfer of knowledge, and the fact that both Mars and Saturn have similar apparent magnitude as visible from Earth, and hence can be confused by all but the most careful observer. So the confusion of Mars and Saturn indicates the incompleteness in orally transmitted information rather than a random astrological signing. Some later reproduction of RSB have attempted to make the plausible by including comets as possible sources of RSB. This confusion is in fact indicative of confused reporting of a genuine event rather than an arbitrary creation of an omen, which would be far more precise. We feel that in view of the rarity of the event of RSB, it's impossible that the event must have been added post facto into any document at a much later date, since it is nearly impossible to guess the occurrence of RSB. Hence, the original reference to RSB must have been introduced by direct observations, which should allow dating of the period of serious scientific of serious scientific observations. From purely astronomical arguments, the RSB is an extremely rare event due to very slow nodal regression of Mars and Saturn, and the requirement of co-alignment with an observer from Earth. Even if post-6th millennium observers may have been able to decipher this, extrapolation from this RSB would be an intellectual jump of great magnitude, and could not have been used by any dishonest author wishing to make the document appear older than its actual date. There would be much easier predictions that could be added post facto by a dishonest author. Similarly, the observers must have noted the sea levels also, since they too were impossible to guess and add post facto. This is obvious since the Harappans had spread themselves in the Sarasvati Valley and travelled extensively down the river. A rising sea level necessarily reduces the water flow from Sarasvati to the Arabian Sea, increasing the general water level of the river. A dramatic rise in sea level can cause gigantic flooding when a sudden rise in sea level blocks the drainage of river into the sea. So if this is correct, then this idea of geological and continents dividing is pure horseshit. It's absolute garbage. Everything we're told about geology is bullshit. If all that's actually happened is sea levels have rose and high ground has become divided by oceans. So that's interesting. Also, a rising sea level necessarily reduces the water flow from Sarasvati to the Arabian Sea, increasing the general water level of the river. A dramatic rise in sea level can cause gigantic flooding when a sudden rise in sea level blocks the drainage of a river into the sea, and the situation can be further accentuated by gigantic downpours in the upstream region and possibly precipitate into major earthquake in vulnerable regions. Hence, the Harappans must have made observations regarding the fluctuations in the sea levels, possibly first in Kutch area. As these two extraordinary natural phenomena of RSB and sea level rise have occurred simultaneously twice in 10th and 6th millennium BC, the Harappans must have associated the two as law in nature. Conclusions. We feel that the present work strongly indicates that the tradition of making and recording intricate astronomical events in the Harappan culture was very strong in 6th millennium BC, and probably as early as 10th millennium, and that the memory of such reports are available several centuries later. However, how do we know that this is not what original Egypt was all about before the Sumerians jumped in? Or Anunnaki, as you know, Anuna, if you get back to data not sort of promulgated by Sitchin. However, since the knowledge was not Indo-European in origin, it was not codified in the Vedas, even though the Vedic scholars would have learnt about this from their Harappan counterparts. This information was kept in oral tradition, and astronomers in 7th century and 15th century AD referred to this work and even tried to work out its possible repetition. Must have been very impressed by the references to RSB in the ancient documents that have since been lost. Hence, the very mention of RSB and its re-evaluation over several centuries indicates the emphasis and importance associated with astronomical events in the Indian literature several millenniums ago. And acknowledgements then, we wish to express great appreciation to Dr. Mal Standish of Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Oh my God! Parsons! Oh my God. Well, that's interesting. I'm not surprised they have that in their hands. For who willing help to plotting the movement of Mars and Saturn up to 10,000 BC. Okay, so they helped in the use of the ephemeris. That's better. Of course, if you don't know, Parsons was a partner of Scientology's Hubbard's leader and founder. They were recreating rituals of Aleister Crowley. And of course, Jack Parsons became the head of... oh no, wait a minute. I can't remember now whether I'm not right, one or not actually. Cancel that, I could be off a little slightly. And then there's just a load of references. But in all truth, they go on and on and on about sea level rises and all this garbage, and there's no signs of it whatsoever, and hasn't been since they started collecting. There is where the idea comes from. So, here's about that, chaps and chapesses. So, look, where are we? How many minutes ago here? About there. So there, I thought that was quite interesting because I'd never come across that. But we've all heard about sea level rises, haven't we? And they're always trying to terrify forward, aren't they? So there's where it comes from. Of course, I'll put the document under the video as usual, so you can all have a look and get it yourself. Where are we? Sea level. Mew says sea level must have been higher, as I've seen docks half a mile from the sea level in Cape Town. Okay. I mean, maybe we've had one recently, and that could have set off all the mud floods. If, as it said in there, you raise the sea level, the rivers can't. They're backing up, aren't they? Is that going to spread into the soil around the banks and cause these mud floods and sort of things? So that is interesting, actually. Slipknot says it looks like the old Sinai being created. John Dolman. Astrology is majorly important. Sorry, John Dolman. Yeah, it is very, very much so. Slipknot says, yeah, talking. Sounds like Jingle Jangle. Well, could be, but it is old. It's cited in ancient literature, not under the command and hands of any monks from the over here in the old west. Clearly, it's over in the east. So. But then if you've seen some of the literature which shows the ages that go back way, way back, now that kind of stuff would fit quite well with that breakup of when it's counting epochs, not just ages as we do, but epochs, 26,000 year time epoch. Because there's tables that whether they're correct or not, I don't know, but I've seen these in many books back in the day where these great divisions of these epochs of 26,000 years, and they just go way, way, way back, and then that ties into other esoteric knowledge that you'll find in the East, etc. And it does, it's plausible. You can't just rub it off as nonsense. It's very plausible stuff. Where are we? Right. There's a lot of emojis going dead. Like in the dog shit. Is that a pink dog shit? A pink one with tongue hair? See, I'm not big on emojis, so I don't really know what they mean. Doing a lot for racial relations. Who is? Joanne's got what's that? An alien. Okay. You're getting good at this, Sean. Oh, am I getting good at this? Well, I think as they improve on the old Streamlabs, it certainly improves the game for you guys, I think, which is got to be good. Do you want poppadoms with that, Sean? I do like a poppadom and chutney. I'm not scurrying up curries. That's the only problem. Mew says, can't keep the eyes open. Good night. Good night, me old China. LFX thumbs up. Cos has got the smiley face. Untitled's got the 3 thumbs. And John says the Humber is still the same level as you can see the sandbanks on specific days. Yeah, there is actually something in London in the Thames. It's a stone that they place there in something like 1500s, and it has never ever changed as far as the sea level. I think obviously when there'll be a certain point at the tide, but it never ever goes below or higher at its period. So it's well checked. It's been very well checked. So how they're getting away with this climate month is because it's all this pseudoscience in it that's come via Epstein, Harvard and MIT. Especially MIT, because that's where Epstein's gang were funding any and all research in MIT. So nothing were getting done that wasn't in sync with the shift of truths in science that were required by the priesthood via the Epstein network. So, hence all the blackmail, the reason why the pseudoscience were put on every single media platform through the last 3 years because all the positions that are deciding that are in one way or another on board. Whether it's on board because they're making, or they're on board because they're being blackmailed. So, that endeth Sunday's sermon on this. Remember, the Satanic New Year's Eve for the fruitcakes, entering into May the 1st, the New Year. Of course, the old Earth, New Year's Day is April the 1st. So we did look at it, discussed it, that is it not interesting that the Satanic is in the same month as the Earth, as opposed to the garden or the world. Interesting indeed. So chaps, I hope that made sense. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll put the documents up for reference for any interested parties in such data. And I'm going to say to you, thanks for joining, thanks for taking part, and I'll see you next week. Till the next time. Wait a minute, because I'm rubbish. Bang.
electronic engineering, electronic engineering, electronic engineering.